Thank you all for joining our webinar today. We want to welcome you to our safe and supportive space for this discussion on quiet activism and understanding the psychosocial impacts of FGC. A quick disclaimer, this event will be recorded. We encourage everyone to engage respectfully and ensure the privacy and comfort of all participants. Additionally, closed caption is available on our webinar. First, we have a brief poll to get an understanding of everyone's familiarity with the topics we will be covering today during the webinar. Please be advised that today's webinar is going to involve discussions on female genital cutting. This may include personal testimonies and discussions that could be triggering or deeply emotional for some participants. These conversations are important for understanding the complexities of FGC and the activism against it, but we recognize that they can also be challenging to hear. So we encourage participants to take care of their mental and emotional well-being throughout the session. Please feel free to take breaks or step away from the discussion if needed. This slide outlines the structure of our event today. We will start with a brief introduction, including some screenings of our Voices to End FGMC videos, and then we will jump right into a discussion with our speakers today. There will also be an opportunity for Q&A from the audience. We encourage you to put any questions in the Q&A chat box. And finally, we'll wrap up with a few closing remarks. So I will now pass it off to our moderator for the day, who will introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arifa Katsaboy, and I'm a board-certified internist with a background in public health and medical communications. I first became involved with advocacy around stopping female genital cutting during my time working at WebMD. I'm from the Dowdy Bohra community, which is a small Muslim sect that still practices FGC. And this topic became especially personal to me when I learned that FGC was happening in the United States with little girls who come from educated families. I participated in the Soyo Voices workshop back in 2021, and I'd like to take a moment and share with you that video.
If someone asks if you've been cut, say yes. My grandmother said this as we were leaving her house. I was 9 years old, and her family was staying with her in Nairobi for the summer. I didn't know what she was referring to, but I remember her and my mom talking above me about how other girls were having something done for symbolic reasons. When I was older, I realized they were talking about female genital cutting, and that I had been spared. I also learned many women in my family had experienced Kutna. They all said it was a painful and awful memory. Then in 2017, I heard about a doctor in Michigan who was arrested for female genital cutting. I was stunned. I'm a physician too. I wondered, how could she cut a little girl and think it was okay? I was also mad at myself for being surprised. I really didn't think it was happening in the US. I heard rumors, but I hadn't believed them. Soon after, I was at an event with women from my community. As I watched my daughter with a group of girls, a few toddlers wandered by. All of a sudden, I felt something like a punch in my gut. I had to get up and walk outside to catch my breath. I thought, it's not just the adult women who've experienced Kutna. How many of these teenagers and young girls were also cut? How many of these babies will be cut? It's hard to understand why the ritual of female genital cutting continues amongst different people that in so many other facets of their lives are thoughtful and kind, and certainly don't intentionally want to harm anyone. Waves of feeling upset still come over me, but I channel them into productive activities, like telling my story. My daughter was not cut, and I want other parents who make the same decision to feel proud, like I do, instead of feeling like it's something they have to hide or lie about. Stopping Kutna doesn't compromise our cultural values. It shows the love and respect we have for our girls.
I want to thank you for letting me share this video with you. It's directly related to the topic of quiet activism, and it can start with a small change and really move on to something bigger and greater. In terms of setting the stage for this panel discussion, I did want to review with you how SAYO sees quiet activism. It really refers to the actions and advocacy efforts that individuals undertake on a personal or private level to create change or influence perspectives within their immediate social circles, including family, friends, and community. Can really manifest in various ways depending on individual choices and cultural contexts. For some, quiet activism means having difficult conversations about harmful traditions like FGC within the confines of the family. For others, it could involve educating friends about the psychological and physical impacts of such practices, or even making personal decisions that set precedents within community norms. Today, you're going to hear about this in much more detail. Please, as you reflect on this, share with us your comments, share with us your questions in the Q&A section, and we will try to get to everything. Thank you so much. Let me introduce the panelists to you. They're going to talk about their personal experiences and how quiet activism has evolved over time for them. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is Farah Dalal. By her own account, she is a second generation ABCD, which stands for American Born Confused Desi. She's the survivor of gender violence, an aspiring storyteller, a former educator, and a lifelong cycle breaker. We are happy to have you, Farah. She currently is rediscovering her love of reading, writing, and learning while focusing her time on raising her young children. Here is her video from the Voices workshop.
I remember the words of my friends. Go after him. Why didn't you give that guy your number? He likes you. So, what happened after your movie date? Nothing? College. Everyone says it's the best time of your life. The frustration in their voices is not lost on me. My roommates and peers work hard and play hard. Party, date, have sex. At that time, I could only manage the work part. I assume they boil it down to stereotypes about my culture, which I hate. But it's really because the all-American girl I've worked so hard to be is actually in the company of the faraway women I read about in my sociology textbooks, women who've been cut. I confirmed the truth about my cutting during a routine clinical exam at school. The nurse practitioner said, "I'm sorry, but it seems to have all been removed." I had asked her to look down there after sharing my concerns about what happened to me. Hot, silent tears came quickly, then unleashed. I remembered being a 7-year-old girl lying on my back in a clinic, just like that one. The tears were different then. The fear, then being held down, and finally the stabbing pain that pierced through my insides still haunt me. But I moved on, working hard to distance myself from a community that had other plans for me. When I share this memory with close friends, I'm met with horror and shock, which feels like a confirmation of my otherness and of what I see at the time as the hopelessness of my situation. No one will want me. I am incomplete. I carry the shame like a sword and shield for decades, on guard and ready to defend myself at a moment's notice, trying to preserve what's left. I love the life I've since created, but sometimes I still think about what else I might be doing, how I might be different if I hadn't been cut. I still struggle with a sense of inadequacy. I was taught to hate my body, to question good things that were happening to me, to accept the worst and be okay with it. But now I'm teaching my daughter something entirely different.
Thank you, Farah. Farah, I wanted to ask you, related to your video, you were discussing balancing being an all-American girl with your experiences being cut. How do you feel this intersection has impacted your activism or psychosocial context?
Hi, Arifa. Thanks for having me again. It's hard, right? Because you're two people. You're a person who's been cut, and then you're trying to live your everyday life, do everyday things, go to college, and you have to live life in this duality, which is exhausting, all the time. It's not something you can openly talk about or explain, or without having like a much deeper conversation, why you refuse to do things or why you are the way you are. So it was hard, in reference to the video, like American college, it's just, you have this idea from Hollywood and the media of how it's supposed to be, and I wasn't having that experience. I didn't get to have that experience. I couldn't fully embrace that experience, and I had to watch other people have that experience, or participate in a lot of those things. And I always felt like I couldn't, because I had this burden and I had this secret, and I didn't really know how or when it would manifest. And it was really difficult to live like that, and it really impacted those years for me tremendously.
Thank you for sharing that, Farah. We will be back to talk to you more in just a minute when I introduce the other panelists. The next panelist I wanted to introduce is Doris Makunga. Thank you for joining us. She is the executive director of the Imani Women's Center, and this is a comprehensive, culturally tailored community center that provides comprehensive services to empower women and help them contribute to their economic security and well-being. Doris has over 12 years of experience serving in various leadership roles with nonprofit organizations on refugee affairs and health promotion and education. Thank you, Doris. I'm gonna, we'll show her video and then we'll speak with her.
Why did this question and many others strike a chord with me to my very soul? Is it because I've known about FGM but never really put faces to the numbers? Is it because I come from a tribe in Kenya that used to cut girls? The practice of FGM in my tribe, Meru, is shrouded in secrecy, and not much was mentioned to me growing up. It is only now in my adult life that the veil has been uncovered for me. Are the voices of my ancestors who silently suffered now urging me, do something, do something? I've spoken with women in a refugee resettlement hub in Clarkston, Georgia. Many of them made connections for the very first time between what was done to them as little girls and the medical and mental health challenges they face today. I can still hear their voices in the quiet moments of my days. You mean it doesn't have to hurt when I pee? You mean I'm supposed to have 2 holes down there? Can I have sex with my husband and be pain-free? Now that I've shared my story, how can I get rid of the pain in my head? My husband left me because I did not enjoy sex with him. I did not know that when I urinate, it's not supposed to trickle. My doctor asked me what happened down there. I did not know something was wrong with me. I'm afraid my husband will make our daughters go through this. Why does my whole body hurt? My period is too painful. I thought I had difficulty with childbirth because I did something wrong. Can you help me get fixed down there? Is there a doctor who can open me back up? I need to be free and powerful. There's one question that all of them asked. How can I get help? In that safe space where they shared their stories, a fire was lit inside of me, an urgency to act. I am all the ancestors I pour libation to. They are no dead people. We just shed ourselves. I'm all of them together, calling for an end to FGM.
Sorry about that delay. Thank you, Doris. I did want to ask you, you discussed the veil being lifted and when you were working with refugee women, how have psychosocial contexts contributed to this?
Thank you for the question, Arifa. Wow, watching that video again brings up so much emotion for me. It really stirs up a lot of emotions. So, lifting the veil is in reference to going beyond getting insight into the lives of FGM survivors and what they have to live with, for many of them, for the rest of their lives. And so, having access to these women who are clients at the Amani Women's Center every day and seeing what kind of issues come up when engaging them. A lot of work has been done when it comes to stopping FGM, and a lot more needs to be done. We're all aware of that. But there's very little that has been done to cater to or give care, provide care to women who've actually gone through FGM or who are survivors. And so, some of the things that come up when engaging these women are the things that I mentioned in the video, pain with urination, dysuria, PTSD, depression. I remember quotes like, folks sharing that some women, sharing that they want to be happy, they want to feel free. Some women expressing fear of getting fixed down there and what that would look like for them going back into their communities, and the fear of being ostracized. I know women who shared that in giving birth, they have been forced to sew back their vagina after giving birth, and some of them wanted to not go through that process again, but that double trauma of having to give birth and getting sewn again, just because of the fear of what your society or your community will think about you. There's also women who've expressed, again, as mentioned in the video, painful intercourse and how that affects their marriages. And I mean, there are just so many layers, and we're talking about the psychosocial effects, and it's just it's a totally different world of women who are crying for help and looking for safe spaces where they can express themselves freely. And so I'm sure we'll delve deeper into this as we have more discussions moving along, but this is what it really looks like for most of the women in the communities that we serve, that are where FGM is prevalent. Thank you.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Our final speaker today is Lavina Plummer, and she is an intersectional human rights attorney combating violence against women, children, and minorities while striving to advance social justice and impact globally. It's good to see you again, Lavina. I wanted to ask you, what motivated you to participate in this webinar today and contribute to our conversation on quiet activism?
Thank you so much for having me on this webinar. I think for me, I am a survivor of FGC, and I found that out, and I realized that much into my early 20s. And when I found out, it was like a shock to me. I still think I learned so much about it and about my own body even today, which is years after it's happened to me. And I think just watching these videos, even right now, I realized that while even me as a survivor and as someone that participates actively in the fight against FGC, I still have so much to learn, right? I still find out something new. And I think my activism style has always been loud activism. So for me, quiet activism is such a fascinating and such a humbling sort of way to engage. And I will always be part of this forever.
That's great. And that's a good lead in into all our next questions. So for the audience, we've started the panel discussion portion of the webinar. And if you have questions you want to ask, please put them in the Q&A section, and we will try to get to as many as we can. So as you know, in the realm of advocacy, many paths are available for change. And some are less visible, but just as impactful. So we'd like to review that more in depth today. And so my first question to the group is, in your view, how do more personal forms of activism contribute to advancing the conversation and action against FGC. Farah, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Like Lubaina, I started off a little bit louder as well. And when I did that, the reaction wasn't great. I felt like I wasn't being heard in the way that I wanted to be heard. And so it was more of an evolution of sorts into being a little quieter. And what that meant for me was kind of turning the focus on myself, using my name, first and last name, which was a big deal, as I had been anonymously doing the work for almost 2 decades. The Voices story and the video that you just saw was really my kind of I would liken it to a coming out of sorts. And so it was a really big deal, but I felt like doing it this way in this format was less threatening. I wasn't personally attacking friends or family or questioning them or challenging them in the way that they were receiving it, when I tried to have those more difficult conversations. And so for me, and it took a while, but I used myself and my own story essentially. And that was, that I feel like that has been more powerful.
That's great. It is generally an evolution, and I'm glad you're giving yourself grace as you sort of go through that. Our next question is, how has your approach to activism against FGC evolved over time? And I can actually kind of take a lead on sort of talking also about my evolution. I really started strictly in the professional space, and that was very safe for me. So my job at WebMD involved creating articles and videos. So I was working with leaders across the country who are studying this topic, educating providers, healthcare providers, physicians, and nurses about the topic. And that was a great way for me to get out there. And I was much more private about the personal community, the religious community that I come from. But over time, I realized that someone with what I was doing, I could actually be someone that others could look to and quietly come to for advice. And people were doing that, and are doing that. And so I decided to just come out with a Voices workshop and really address that. I love my family. I love. There's so many wonderful things that I have been given because of my cultural background, and so much that I value. And this is one small piece of it that's not quite right, but nothing's quite right in any community. And I can, contribute to hopefully stopping this and other little girls. And really, I think what's evolved since then, because again, I was being very safe about my my activism in that who would cut a little girl? Like, there's nothing controversial in my mind related to that. And preventing this in the next generation, to me, is a very safe space to advocate for. But over time, that third sort of evolution has really been acknowledging the impact on the women around me, who maybe don't have the medical issues that Doris spoke to, but they certainly have the psychological issues and the issues with sexual pleasure and sexual pain. And, that's a topic that we don't talk about at all. So I think my next sort of phase is really being much more loud about that, and loud again at an event at my house, not necessarily, super loud. Well, actually, this panel, I guess, counts. But I think it is something that evolves over time. And as you dive into the topic and you learn more and more, you can sort of shift what aspects of it you're addressing. Anybody else want to comment in our group? Okay, I'll go ahead and go on to the next question. What personal or observed experiences can you share about engaging in quiet activism against FGC? Doris, do you want to take that one?
Okay. I love the words quiet activism. I mean, it sounds so innocuous, right? But it's just so impactful. It sounds gentle and it sounds, non-threatening. But in my experience, it's very, very impactful. I'm uniquely positioned in that my personal and professional experience in the FGM space are intertwined. As mentioned in my video, I come from a tribe in Kenya called Meru that used to practice FGM, but I would like to say no longer does, because my mother didn't go through it. So it was probably her mother that went through it. But it was never spoken of, never, and so fast forward, I find myself, running an organization in Clarkson, Georgia, which is a resettlement hub for refugees. And I come across women who come from cultures where FGM is prevalent. And this becomes part of my work day to day. And so, this was amplified even more after our organization, Amani Women's Center, worked on a research study that was funded by CDC in partnership with NORC at the University of Chicago. And this was a women's health needs study focused primarily on African women, again, who come from communities that have a prevalence of FGM. And as a result of this study, so much was unearthed. Just we interviewed over, hundreds and hundreds of women who came to share their stories and were able to open up in a safe space that we provided, and really provided that insight into what it feels like to live as a woman who's a survivor. And that information was heavy, and it was just something that struck a chord in me to want to do something about it and to figure out what quiet activism looks like moving forward after the research. And so, again, this is now my life's work, and here I am today. And like Arifa is saying, you never think it's going to be in a very visible space, but I guess it comes with the territory, and it's great to find like-minded folks to share experiences with and to learn from and to support each other. So thank you.
Our next question is, have you noticed any repercussions or challenges with discussing FGMC through your activism? So you've mentioned it a little bit, but this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the community backlash and estrangement from family and friends.
I can take that one. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but being a little bit louder when I was in college, and I can look back now and realize that a lot of my behavior was grieving. But I posted on I'm also, if you didn't know, part of the Dowdy Bora community, and I had posted on a thread for like young people in our community, and maybe Arif and Lubena, you can jump in anytime, but we're, a close community. There's only so many degrees of separation between you and the person in the next town. And so things get around, and it's kind of hard to kind of live in that. But I thought the feedback I would receive would be really positive. For me at the time, it was very black and white. Like, why are we doing this? I wanted answers, and I thought young people would be just as appalled as I was. But I was met with the extreme opposite. Everything from being called a reformist to being referred to as the FGM girl, stirring up drama in the community. Some of the adults and members of my family, extended family, were not liking the negative attention I was receiving. They felt it was a reflection on them. I was also, very young at the time, and in that marriageable age where, people are looking at you as a marriage prospect, and your parents are thinking about this, and it's just kind of like a very relevant time for a young person. And to be bringing this up and to be talking about this and to be shedding what they deemed at the time was the negative light on the community, it was really hard. And my voice was very alone. There were not a lot of people sticking up for me. I thought that was most hurtful were, people I was very close to not defending me, not agreeing with me, not sticking up for me. And it really forced me to go dark for a long time, and to be driven back into like anonymity for a long time, because it was too much to handle by myself. There weren't a lot of other women willing to talk about it, especially because I grew up in a community where every little girl had it done. So there were several of us that I personally knew, and the silence was deafening, and I didn't understand why people weren't more angry. And so I was very much alone in that. I also remember going to older cousins who were married and trying to ask them about their sexual capability, because I didn't have the experience at the time. And, there was just no answer there. Nobody wanted to talk about it in my family. And again, they would kind of flip it around on me and say, all kinds of things. It was an extremely isolating position to be in. It was frustrating. It was sad. I have experienced estrangement from my extended family. There are several relatives who are just not interested in speaking with me anymore. And not just because of this, but, related to like a lot of what they think are behaviors that are, characteristic of me. Like there's been a narrative now that I'm, trying to stir up things in people or cause trouble, when really it's just, I wanted answers or support. So that's been really hard. I've also distanced myself from the community. It was, once you kind of have a reputation, that's hard to kind of undo. And it was more of a choice on my part. For my own mental health and sanity, I had to really kind of take a step back. And that also became quite difficult because I ended up marrying someone who's also in the community. So there was the added issue of in-laws and someone else's family. And so that kind of further complicated how I practiced, and how I was an activist, am an activist. So feel free to jump in, either of you, if you want to kind of speak to any of that. But I definitely have experienced both and still do to this day.
That's a lot. Go ahead, Lavina.
No, I just wanted to say I resonate completely. Like we have this method where we put our hand up to show resonance when someone's speaking. And I grew up in India, right? I didn't even grow up in the United States. And the funny thing is, when I moved to the United States, I thought that this doesn't happen in the first world. So I thought I was actually more pushed against the wall, because I grew up in a society that is, more sort of cares and is more concerned about what people think and how you need to act, right? And it's also I grew up in Bombay, which is pretty much the sort of center of where the community operates, right? So the head of the community kind of lives in the city, and it's a big community in the city of Bombay. And I do remember when I'd started talking about it, people used to call me the raging feminist, and that she always comes to like gatherings and talks about things that no one wants to talk about, and no one wants to hear. So I even remember I have a huge group of Bora friends, and I would just casually bring up conversations and be like, hey, has this happened to you? And they were like, we don't talk about this. And I was like, I just want to know if it's happened to you, and I think I was also naive when I was younger. I'm still pretty naive when it comes to things I'm passionate about, because I find it odd for people to not want to, share and talk about things. So I think what I faced was backlash directly as well, where I remember, my grandparents being told that like, you need to tell your granddaughter to like, shut up. And I think now I'm a little bit more open, a little bit more quiet, I guess, in my activism as well. And I think it works. It works a little bit better to kind of find that balance as well. And now I don't kind of bring it up the way I used to. But I honestly, Farah, relate so much to everything you said. And I grew up in a whole different country, in a whole different society with a whole different kind of people. And my experience is very similar,
Thanks for sharing.
Lavina, building on that, when you found people who can be allies, what can you recommend to them on how to like support the conversations around FGC so that they are positive in terms of making an impact, maybe in not being judgmental, not putting people on the defensive right off the bat, so they can be open to making changes?
No, absolutely. And I think being an ally, or just allyship in general, is such a fascinating concept, right? It basically means to support or proactively make an effort to probably support something that may not have impacted you directly, right? And may never impact you directly. And I think it kind of correlates so much to just principles of empathy, in general, and awareness. So I've become more nuanced in my need for allyship as well over the years. And I think there's two things: there's professional allies, and then there's personal allies, right? And I think something I have found in my life personally is my allies are people, or my friends, that have absolutely nothing to do with the community. They don't even know what FGC is. They show up because they care about me and they love me. And I think it starts like that, right? It's that dialogue that starts. You just need people that care about you. And I do think that more professionally, there is intersectionality, right? In just human rights violation or things that impact human beings negatively, especially sort of a violation like FGC. It's not removed from other social problems like poverty, lack of healthcare, lack of access to education. So while it's not true that those are the only factors, right? Because I mean, I grew up with education, healthcare, all the information in the world. My parents went to college, know everything, and they still, let it happen to me. So I'm not saying that's the only factor, but there is a lot of intersectionality. And I think with allyship, that's important to understand that everyone's story is a little bit different and everyone's journey is a little bit different. And if you can just find your pack and your army of people, right, as a survivor of FGC or anything else that impacts you, I think pretty well. You've got people to support you, and I think that kind of amplifies, those voices amplify over time, I would hope.
No, that's great, Labina. I mean, I think that that's really good information for people in our who are watching this to understand and really reflect on building that team. Doris, I wanted to ask you, Farah and Labina and I have really been focusing on our own community. What are you seeing in other communities that you're working with where this topic, is just front and center?
Yeah, so I mean, drawing from what Farah and Lubina have just shared, there's always a need for a safe space for folks who've gone through this to come to and share their experiences. And sometimes it may look like folks who have not gone through it, but are supportive, like Lubina is saying, those are your allies, that's your tribe of supporters, right? And then at the Amani Women's Center, what we've done is we have what we call sister circles. And these are monthly get-togethers where women who've gone through this experience come and share and exchange and learn. So we've provided a very safe space, and we invite experts in different fields of, like, let's say, for instance, reproductive health. And those experts come and are able to answer questions that are very private to these women. Again, it's in a safe space. They don't feel judged. They don't feel alone. They're among folks with shared lived experiences. And so these sisters are offering group support to each other. It's group therapy. It's also a place where we intentionalize self-care. And we talk about that often and create activities around that. We have potlucks, where folks come together, do things that are very cultural, but are very healing practices that are very cultural. Eating, breaking bread together, drinking coffee, traditional coffee ceremonies, tea, which is is a very cultural thing in some of our cultures. Over those, coffee drinking ceremonies, a lot is shared. There's you open up and to receive and give. And it's just such a beautiful space. We've also currently introduced, or recently introduced, African yoga. We also do vision boards. I mean, it's really just a space where women say things like, I would never have shared this with my doctor. I've never known how to ask this question. I've never really known, I've always thought that this issue is unique to me. And now that I know my sisters are going through the same thing, I feel relieved that it's not me. I'm not the problem. My body is not failing me because of me, of something that I have done. It's because of something that was done to me, and so, yeah, so, I just want to stress the importance of having that support system around folks who've gone through this.
No, that's great, Doris. And I want to add my experience with working with Sayo at our retreats and at some of the other events where we have small group discussions, similar to what your sister circles is talking about. We often will provide professional mental health support. And so if someone is triggered by the conversation, or sometimes you don't have words to explain the emotions that you feel, and suddenly you hear someone else talk about it and you're like, oh, well, I've actually, that is how I felt. That can bring on a whole host of physical manifestations of your emotions, as well as just, the whirling within your mind and heart. And so I'm curious what kind of experiences the three of you have had in terms of pulling in that mental health professional angle to really support your own quiet activism and to guide others that may come to you in the midst of this. I've had people come to me quietly to talk about what's happened to them or what someone wants them to do to their child, or you know, just that emotion of how do you face your parents when you realize they've done this to you.
I'd love to say something here about just uh, mental health when you're dealing with something like this. It's not gonna lie. I think I realized that you need mental health support after I was also connected with Sayo. Before then, I mean, mental health is also an interesting sort of, it's on a spectrum, right? With how we kind of understand it and treat it. And growing up the way I did, I still think I get like, very often, like my parents would be like, but why are you anxious? Like, what is anxiety? Right. So if you're still there on that spectrum of not even understanding basic anxiety, I do think then understanding how I feel about being a survivor of FGC is a little bit off the charts here for your immediate. And I think for me, I expected so much support from, say, my dad or my mom or my grandmom, that when I didn't get it, it kind of makes you feel a little bit unloved, unheard. And that's not to say that you doubt that they love you, right? And that your rational brain knows that. But I think when you find out that something like this happened to you and it was solely the responsibility of your family to let it happen to you or not let it happen to you, it's kind of a hard pill to swallow. And I think I'm still not sure I've ever talked about this with my therapist or with anyone. Like I've never gone up to someone in private and asked, and Arfa, you might hear from me, but I think Sayo has really helped me understand that this has a psychological impact on you, and in the way you also engage with whomever you want to have a sexual relationship with. And I feel I've never been able to talk to men about it, or discuss it, because I'm just like, that's so weird. Like, why are we talking about this? And now I've started doing it, and the men that run away are an easy way to sort of sieve that out. But yeah, I think psychological impacts, I'm still learning.
I
Yeah.
would agree. Yeah.
Go ahead, Farah. Sorry.
I just wanted to liken it to being on a roller coaster. I mean, I've definitely been in and out of therapy over the years in different phases of life. Once, in the video during that period of time when I was dealing with a lot of newer emotions, it has come up in my marriage. It has come up when I was pregnant, having children. It manifests differently in my life at different times. And I've sought out therapy during those times to kind of help. I have taken advantage of during when I was making the video. I used the therapist that Sayu provided, and it was very triggering, especially to be in the group and to hear other women's stories. And like Arfa was sharing earlier, really just having that, oh yes, like that's how I felt those moments, or having someone else describe it, watching other people's videos and stories. It was really hard, and then you remember like it was yesterday. And so there was a lot that came out during that time. So it's not linear at all by any means. And yeah, I've had to do that. I've had to take breaks. I've had to stop. Often I would there'd be like a few months where I would just put it aside. And that's kind of how I've been dealing with the mental health aspect.
I want to take a moment and really thank everybody out in the audience. the panelists probably aren't able to keep up with what's going on in our webinar chat and Q&A boxes, and there's a lot of support coming in and a lot of good questions. So I want to actually jump to those questions instead of waiting till the official part of the panel, because they are really following up on these conversations. So one question, and somebody has written, just addressing the life trauma that's come with this that you've brought on, like Doris, you're seeing it with the people that you work with. Labina, Farah, you're experiencing this, and you've talked a little bit about what's helped you heal through the process. What kind of issues do you think you're facing now, and what are you kind of putting together in terms of your self-care? And as you're thinking, I can jump in with what's come up for me. Most recently, and I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but really talking about sex is just very, very difficult. And you can put labels on the mental health piece, you can put labels on the GYN, urologic issues that can come up, the obstetric issues that can come up. But sexual pleasure is taboo in so many cultures to talk about, and even as a at any age, whether you're young and you're not supposed to be sexually active, or you're older and you're supposed to be happily sexually active within the confines of marriage, it's a difficult topic, and I would say that that's the area that I am sort of addressing now, because I do think it lends itself to the larger picture of female genital cutting, that we're not just talking about this isn't like a one and done topic that's off in a corner. This is really piece of a much larger picture related to stereotypes around gender roles and gender violence. All right, I'll let one of you guys speak.
I think for where I'm at now is my relationship with my parents. Even though I don't blame them and I've forgiven them for, letting it happen to me, I think there are so many other things, and I've been in therapy for this, trying to kind of, how do I have a relationship with my parents? Because it's not so much about the FGM, but it's about like, where were you? Like, why didn't you protect me? Like, there's just so many other things like about their role in my life that's related to kind of what happened, but also unrelated. It's just kind of a way of being and the way they were about everything. And that's, my parents are aging. That's really hard. I've never had like a great relationship with them. I've never really had that. And so when you kind of throw in like FGM and how it's impacted me psychosocially in almost every aspect of my life, there is some like resentment there. There's some grief. There's like a lot of stuff going on in how I interact with them. I wish it was different. I wish it was better. I don't really know how to change that, especially when the other party, which I'm, realizing now, is just not capable of changing. And that's like another kind of thing that you have to deal with. Like, really, the work is on me to do. And that's to add like another thing that I have to work on in my life. Like, it feels like burdensome a lot. Like at times it's like, okay, well, there's this area of my life and there's this area of my life and now this, and it's just so much. And so, when I say in my video, like, I wonder how I would be different had I not been cut. Like, would all of this just be easier? Like, maybe I wouldn't have these hangups. Maybe I wouldn't have these issues, these relationships with people that I don't really, I wish they weren't a certain way, and they are. And I wonder how different I would be. I always wonder that. I wonder if I'd be more, pleasant and easygoing and all of these things. So that's kind of what I've been dealing with right now. Thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, thank you.
Flora, you're very pleasant.
Sorry. And I thank you. So if I may go say something, please. If I've always found that it's so brave of folks who've gone through this to come out and share. Farah Lubaina, it's just it's always just it's the moment where we're all like, wow, how can we support and how can we best be of support? And personally, being in charge of an organization that works with women who've gone through this, I've had to figure out how to design programs and services that offer the care and support these women need. And when it comes to mental health, one of the things we've done at Amani Women's Center is identify a culturally attuned therapist whom the women can go to and they have access to. And this is free therapy for all the women who've gone through this. And so we recognize that we come from cultures where the therapy is kind of an alien concept, and mental health actually is kind of a taboo topic. And it's so, getting creative on how we present that to the women and encouraging them to seek that kind of help, because in our cultures, there's no gray area. There's nothing like there are no words for depression, actually. There are no words for anxiety. It's like, are you normal or crazy? And so no one wants to be called crazy. And so seeking mental health usually is perceived that way. And so we're here to educate and say, hey, that's not what it means. Actually, this is what depression is. This is what PTSD is. This is anxiety, and, the more we have those conversations, the more comfortable the women are in seeking help from a therapist, and like I said, preferably a culturally attuned therapist who understands totally why this was done and doesn't have a judgy, perception of what that looks like. And so so far it's working great. I'm very excited to see that we are breaking the idea that seeking mental health therapy is a bad thing. And so that's what I have, chosen to do personally as someone who is in charge of programming and services. Thank you.
Doris, that's great. So I want to get a little more specific for each of you. Can you share an experience where you felt your efforts made a difference? Yeah, go ahead, Lubaina.
I would really hope that this has made a difference, but I do have a really close friend that I think we talked about it so much. I think I made her talk about it so much, and she's decided not to cut her daughter, and also kind of stood up to other family members in her family that have daughters. We don't know if they're going to go through with it, but at least we got one directly impacted. And I do think the other thing that has, and this could be a mix of, say, working with Sayo and kind of using different sorts of activism to talk about this. I do think it's actually helped me a lot as well, personally. And when you are able to be more resolved about something, you're able to impact more meaningfully as well. So I think the way I talk about it now seems to have more of an impact than it used to before. So I am really hoping that we can like send these waves out even more?
For me, I think really just bringing attention and awareness to the issue is how I felt I've made a difference. And, when I refer to the early days, when I started the thread, even though the attention was at my expense, I feel like up until that point, this is pre-Sahio, that most young people in our community did not know what it was. When I was a child growing up, we heard the phrase a pinch of skin a lot of the time. And what I would imagine was just like, the palm of my hand and like, a little like nick or a cut, and did not realize that it was like a removal. And so I think even just talking about it, being one of the first people to talk about it in our community, was impactful because it got people talking about it and it got the conversation going. And, a few years later, Sahil was born, and I feel like I helped. Even though like the relations with my family are strained, I think like we've never like had a conversation, or people have never said in my family, like, I'm not going to do this, but I think there's an understanding. For example, my brother has 2 baby daughters. I think it would be like out of the question for him, based on everything he's seen me go through and the work that I've been doing, to just, it's just not going to happen. I think it's quietly understood between the 2 of us. And I don't know that he would have even had the knowledge, had all of this work not been being done, and his sister being so vocal about it. So I would just kind of give those examples kind of personally and like, outside of my family.
I'll add for me, just putting out this information with Sayo and other organizations. People reach out to me and I take their calls. So I get cold texted, on LinkedIn, from people around the country, and people within my community who know me personally have reached out to me. So I feel like just being present in this space, and people knowing that I will keep things confidential, and that with me, I'm not going to push them. I'm going to listen. I'm going to help them get to the resources they may need. That's been really positive. Go ahead, Doris.
Yeah, and actually, Arifa has been that person that I remember that we met, who actually reached out to you. I was searching.
That's right, Doris. You reached out to me. That's exactly right. And then I connected you with Mariette. See ya.
Exactly. So, and so, yeah, it brings me to my point of what we've done at Amani is to identify stakeholders in this space and folks who have experience in working in this space, and knowing very well that this work cannot be done alone. So we've been intentional in collaborating, mobilizing and collaborating with folks in this space. And what that looks like is, we have a project we're calling Save Our Sisters, solely focused on women who've gone through FGM, survivors of FGM. And this project engages clinicians, engages government officials, just all kinds of folks. It's a diverse team of stakeholders who we think have some kind of connection to or access to women who are FGM survivors. And in this collaboration, what we've been able to do is create a pathway for medical, physical, psychological, and spiritual care for women survivors. And this is a holistic approach. And again, it really helps to have those partners, because what has happened is when a woman comes to our sister circles and shares the need for help, we're able to figure out exactly what she needs. And if it's therapy, we're able to connect her to a therapist, like I mentioned before, who is culturally attuned. If it's medical care, we're able to connect her to a partner who is part of this collaboration. Locally here in Clarkston, we are partnered with the Harriet Tubman Women's Clinic that are providing medical care, that are also connected to Grady Hospital, which is a larger hospital. Because of this partnership, I want to say that we've had 3 women who've gone through defibrillation, and that has totally changed their lives. And I can tell you, we're so excited about collaborating and partnering and figuring out ways to support women who've gone through this. I can't stress enough the need for this, because we always talk about ending FGM, but we never stop to think about the women who've gone through it. And so this just gives me the greatest joy to be able to support women who in a safe space, and again, through collaborations that have turned out to be very effective. And so we're excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Doris. That's exciting what the Imani Women's Center is accomplishing.
Thank you.
Another question for all of you. What would you say to someone who feels stuck or uncertain about how to start or continue their activism?
I'd say, just from my personal experience, look after yourself. That's very important. I feel like I don't always do that because I feel that there's an intersectionality of your professional life and your personal life if you are in the space. So I have never been able to detach from what impacts me versus what impacts others. And it's very important to do that. I think it's very important to step back. If something personally affects you, right, emotionally, physically, and in the case of FGC, it's everything. It's important to, while I say this, I sound like I'm saying this, but I don't do it. So I'm really trying myself to do this, right, where you step back and it's okay. It doesn't mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you're not doing your part. But I do think it can continue in the background, right? But I will say, having said that, you can take a break and you can step back. Don't give up, right? Like bounce back to it in whatever form or manner that works for you. So figure out what your sort of sweet spot is and what sort of works for you, and keep going. It's I don't know. I think activism and just human rights is a marathon, right? You just add it your whole life, at least. I mean, I am. So that's the only thing I would say.
And I would add to think about it in terms of quiet activism. If you're looking and educating yourself about the topic, that is activism. I think a lot of people don't realize that female genital cutting occurs on every continent, in most religions, and many communities that you wouldn't even be aware of. And so learning about that is a really important, and that allows you to be prepared when a conversation opens up. And a quiet conversation with relatives, if it saves one child from being cut, it's everything. So it doesn't have to be on mass levels. So that's what I would say.
I would just add, start writing, like write your thoughts down. That's what I did. You don't have to attach the name to your work. You can write it for yourself. And now Sahio exists. You can share it with them and someone can help you develop it. They will help you post it anonymously. They will make sure it doesn't go anywhere. You can reflect, you can share your thoughts, you can ask questions. There's so many more resources now than when I was 19 and doing it alone. Like there's, even if you don't want to share or write, you know, there are other ways just by getting in touch with the organization and volunteering or reposting something. I mean, it can just be so small. You can show your support in that way. But for me, it was just start writing it down and see kind of where that takes you.
I would say I would totally agree with everyone. We are in need of allies. Allies, please, out there. Reach out. There's so many amazing organizations in this space that are looking for volunteers, are looking for ambassadors, or you know, folks to donate, right? You know, Sahel is one of them. US and FGMC Network is another. There's so many. Of course, Amani Women's Center and others, folks who are doing this work need support from folks who just, you don't have to have gone through this. You just need to have the heart to support and help, you know, this movement. And so, yeah, I mean, like, there's just so many places that you can apply yourself, even in the smallest way, that can make such an impact, a big impact. I want to shamelessly plug in that Amani Women's Center, the survivors make these beautiful necklaces. We would love for folks to purchase, support. 100% of the proceeds go to support their medical care. So that we pray and hope that it will be a movement. The women who go to get surgical care need medication. They need, most of them are underinsured or you know, not insured. So I'm sure we can find ways to figure out how to get support from folks out there who are willing to support. So that would be, I just want to encourage all of you that you can do a little bit in your little corner and it can go a long way. Thank you.
Doris, there's a question for you in the Q&A section that I wanted to ask you that sort of builds on everything we've been discussing, and it's about the pressure that's coming within the community. Coming in the community related to FGC. Is it from men, women, both? And what can men do to end this practice? And I think it's a really important question. And I thought, like, I'm surprised it didn't come up earlier, but go ahead, Doris.
It is a fantastic question. The pressure comes from both men and women. I have to say this because we have women who still buy into the cultural, religious aspect of, you know, FGM. And that's why we do a lot of education. You know, we literally see light bulb moments happen where we connect a woman's reproductive health issues to FGM or mental health issues to FGM. And when that illumination takes place, this woman is so empowered now to say that she does not want her daughter to go through this, because she never thought what she goes through, her health issues, mental health, physical, have anything to do with FGM. And so the more we educate, the more we are finding that women are resolving not to have this done to their daughters. We've been able to, fortunately, engage some men who are able to be advocates and you know, ambassadors who can educate other men about this. It has been slow in the uptake, I have to say that. There is still a lot of fear of being ostracized and you know, just not wanting to be seen as an ally. And even our organization, we have to be very careful. So that's why our activism is not loud, it's quiet. You know, we don't say we're here to end FGM. We don't do that because we recognize we're working in communities that it's still not we're not sure which way it can go, you know. So, but those allies that have come up, and especially the men, we are happy to again be able to take the opportunity to educate them on what this means. I'm aware that in Kenya, where I come from, there's a tribe called Maasai that, you know, practice this. And the men had no idea what that looks like. They just knew that their sisters are taken away at some time, you know, point of their life's journey. And a very bold young lady took a video to the community, to the village, and showed them exactly what happens. And I remember, I believe it's somewhere online, actually on YouTube somewhere. That was such an aha moment for the men, that they took on the cause and are now leading the movement to end FGM. I mean, it's just amazing that what, you know, lack of knowledge does, or knowledge does, you know. So bringing men to the table is absolutely important. And we're just happy when we even see a trickle of them, because the hope is that it keeps growing and there will be a ripple effect. But thank you for that question. It's a really good question.
And that I would add, that's been my experience. When men understand that the reason the women in their lives have UTIs all the time, or aren't enjoying sex, or are actually having pain with sex, or are there's a risk to their lives because of their pregnancy, or they're immediately on board. And so that's been surprising to me, because it's often the women in the older generations who are working from premises which may or may not be at all relevant to whatever the reason was that FGC started in the community. They'll say that, well, you can't have a baby if you don't have if you're not cut, or you're not going to enjoy sex if you have. I mean, there's completely different reasons that people will give that have nothing to do even with how it started. But we are actually running out of time, unfortunately. I did want to go through quickly some of the questions. Oh, I guess it's time for the poll questions. I did want to answer one quick question from somebody in Canada about how speaking to the contributions of healthcare professionals to support quiet activism. I just wanted to let you know there's a lot of work being done by SAO with trainings for health professionals. So if you're interested, please contact us and we can address that. Okay, I will turn it over to Sophia to move along with finishing up our call. Thank you everyone for your contributions.
So we just have one final poll that we want to launch, and we will give you a few moments to do that now. We also wanted to uplift our upcoming 2024 virtual activist retreat. This is a three-day retreat filled with educational workshops and self-care activities to connect and empower individuals belonging to FGMC practicing communities interested in ending FGMC. Previously, this was limited to South Asian communities only, but this year the retreat will be the first time it will include other FGC practicing communities, such as groups belonging to API and MENA regions. This retreat is open to individuals from practicing communities that are currently residing in North Africa. I do want to put an emphasis that we are not able to accept individuals living outside North America for this upcoming retreat, but we do hope to plan a more global retreat sometime in the future. The days and times of the workshop are shown here on the slide, and I will share a link in the chat for those interested in applying. If you're interested in future events like this one, please take the time to fill out the survey shared in the chat box, and it will also be sent out in an email. And we'd like to thank you all for attending our webinar today. Please feel free to contact us at the emails provided here on the slides for more information, and visit our organization's website.